Welcome to episode 74 of Discourse in Magic with Steve Reynolds. Steve is a fantastic magician, an incredible card magician, and a lifelong student. He has studied a lot of the works of Ed Marlowe and Brother John Hammond, and that is what a lot of his material is based off of. And that makes him very interesting. He has been studying incredible people and produced incredible material. Steve has some of the most up-to-date and detailed work on the Zero Shuffle, and we are really excited for you to hear this episode. It is really theory-based, so if you like really getting into the nitty-gritty of the doing of magic, you're going to love this episode. A lot of information to take home. Here it is, episode 74 with Steve Reynolds. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with a good friend who I've been trying to get on the podcast for a little while. I have seen him lecture. I've sat in the back of a car for a long ride with him, shared a hotel room with him, and I'm very excited to share some of the genius work that he has with you guys. He has studied a lot from some names that you know. He is like a forever student, and I'm so excited to share everything about him. Here he is, Steve Reynolds. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
We're very excited to have you and excited to dive in and talk some magic
Sure.
theory, and things like that. I remember I watched you do a whole whack of routines because I saw you do a lecture in Kingston and then another one at the convention. But one of my favorite routines that you did had a 5-card poker hand that kept repeating, and I thought it was so funny. And I'm really excited to just dive in and talk magic theory. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into magic?
Well, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, but early on, I was born there, but we had a small stint when I was real little in Washington State, outside of Seattle. And I was about 7 years old. I did a book report on Houdini. And we had to do something related to the book. And, of course, I didn't know. I had the kids, close their eyes when I did the trick, So they didn't see anything. So I thought that's good. That's a start. But then I got interested further. I got a magic set, as the usual story. And then somebody gave me a book on how to do tricks with cards. Now, the first thing I should say is, I've been interested in cards since I was 7 because my mother taught me to shuffle. And I was interested in cards before I even saw any magic with them. So I was already enamored with cards when I got that book. So I'm like, wow, you can do this stuff with the thing I already love, So I was right into it right away. And I didn't look back. I just kept going. So those were the early interests in how I got started. But then when I was 15, that's when I got Genie magazine when it was still out west. And through that, I got the Brother John Hammond tape that Joe Stevens put out. And that's when I saw card magic for the first time. So from 7 to 15, it was just imagined. I had never seen it.
So that was one of the things that I wanted to really focus on and dive into. You are or from what I understand, a real lifetime student of Brother John Hammond and Ed Marlowe. So the approach that you've taken to magic and learning through the works of those two gentlemen and other people is a really unique one. So can you touch a little bit on how you sort of go through magic in their footsteps or learning through them or however else you've taken?
Well, I was struck by Hammond's work, well, besides, being the first thing I've ever saw. But when I did it, the twins, one of his famous tricks, for my father and my grandfather, their reaction was far beyond what I had imagined it would be. And I knew there was something special here with Hammond's work. And as I continued to do it for friends, as I grew and my abilities to understand how these things made the impact, I started dissecting the psychology. Because as I did these things for people, they were reacting to things that I wasn't quite sure why. I mean, I was doing one thing and they were reacting to a completely different thing. So I'm like, what is happening here? And so the idea that the magic happens in the minds of the spectator, that old standby phrase, really hit home. And so I started looking more into the psychology of how people remember, what they forget. I mean, this was pre inattentional blindness and inattentional amnesia, because Hammond was applying those principles maybe unknowingly, or he knew them in a different way. And so I sort of, over the years, began to experiment with how far I could go with subtlety. I mean, almost over the edge. If you've ever seen a particular version of Spectator Cuts the Aces that I have, which you may never see because I've moved on from it. But, that was like almost over the cliff with subtlety. So then at the same time, I was on the phone with John Rockerbomber. Now, I've been talking to John on the phone since I was 16. And I'm 40 now, and I just talked to him yesterday. So it's been a long conversation. And, of course, being a student of Rockerbomber, I had to study Marlowe. That's just like part of the deal. And so we had all these technical elements, the sleights, the finesses. Later I would find that Marlowe really did work very subtly at times. And that was a welcome addition to my understanding of some of the Hammond material. And so that's when I took these things out to work them and do them for people in the restaurants and at the bars and stuff, I began to start fusing them together. The ideas, the principles, the approaches, I began to fuse when I was sort of in my late 20s and into my 30s. And that became what I referred to as the monk's way. And all that was taking the psychology of the audience and applying it not as part of the effect, but also integrate it within the methodology. So while they may forget one thing, I can use that instead of a slight. So then what happens is my delivery of the procedure becomes smoothed out. It becomes more magical because there's no technical tip-offs. And so that's the way I think about these things, is how can I jump over technique? I mean, you need the technique sometimes, and that may be the best approach. But it's not always the best approach. So, and I'm always looking for ways not to make things easier, but to smooth things out, make things more direct in its delivery. And so using the Marlowe Marlowe methodology and the Hammond psychology, I mean, that's just a deadly combination.
So you're looking at this based on the audience, which I think is super, super important. Mm-hmm. And you got sort of hooked on it based on doing material and then seeing how the audience responds to it. How can somebody at home start implementing this sort of smoothing out procedure in their work, aside from studying all the people that you studied?
Right. Well, the easy answer is I don't know. But second, you just need to start realizing that the performance is about the audience and not your skill and not your ability and not the second deal that you've practiced for 10 years and now you're going to use it in every trick.
Right.
You need to look at it's just like the old guys used to say, what is the action supposed to look like? Right. And then you simulate that. Well, you have to do the same thing when it comes to the effect as well. Take moves out. Take them out, see if there's a moment where the spectator is convinced already. If the initial switch was convincing and deceptive, and they've internalized that moment or that idea or that condition, then you don't have to overprove it. You don't have to flash
Right, you
the
don't
bottom.
need
They've
another
already
convincer.
seen it. So you're looking for those moments where the audience has already taken over for you. You've relinquished
It's all about doing
control.
just enough.
A lot of magicians,
Right.
and this is one of those things, I don't want to sound like this is the answer. I can only say from my experience. A lot of magicians that I see or talk with, they have trouble relinquishing control to the audience in that regard. When it comes to the effect and the magic part, yeah, it's all theirs. Even though some guys still like to twirl a card on the finger after they reveal the card. It's like, well, which are you wanting me to be impressed with here? Your skill or my moment that you've given me? So basically, and I don't want to get on the flourish part, but, so basically it's a matter of, it's like a reciprocal, it's reciprocity. You give them something, they give you something in return. And so you've created this connection, not in the sense of presentation, which you should do, but also as part of the method. So look for those moments where the spectator would be satisfied with a condition, and just don't do the move that proves what they should already believe. And that's a good start.
Right. So I guess it's sort of about finding that middle ground where you're not over-proving it, but also like proving it enough.
Exactly. And then you let them take over. And there's a lot of moments. And again, this is not, and I'm not a big fan of this approach that's been going along for a while now, for many years, of course, is to simplify methods where they say method doesn't matter. Well, method does matter. You choose an easy method, it's just going to look like a cluttered mess.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, you're someone who just mentioned that, focus on the effect. It's not about your second deal. It's not about your bottom deal. But you are a well-accomplished card magician in the sense that, you're not someone who's avoiding slights or avoiding difficulty. No. You literally do the knuckle-busting moves, but I think it's because
they're the most optimal
they're required,
moves.
exactly,
yeah.
or that's the best way you've made to do it.
Yeah, they're tools. They're simply tools. I mean, a lot of magicians, a lot of technicians treat moves like they are effects.
Right, yeah.
They treat them in the same way. Like they almost want applause when they do their pass.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like these are supposed to be secret implements that as John wrote, and I'm paraphrasing, that service the effect. They're merely there to service that. But so we can use spectators as slights.
So one of the things that I want to chat about is, today there's literally magic coming out every single day. I'm subscribed on email to all of the different magic companies and as many email newsletters as I can bear. And literally every day there's another person like, this easy to do, disappear in 1 second, no matter your skill level, whatever. And one of the things that I really admire about you...
Wait, what trick is that? Because I want to buy it. Sounds good.
One of the things that I really admire about you is... you found a boatload of content and some idols and some people to focus on and some giants of shoulders who you can stand on. And that's how you've chosen to develop and almost chosen to go deep instead of wide. So can you touch a little bit on standing on the shoulders of giants?
Well, I realized very quickly that I can't know everything. And so...
Not with that attitude.
Right. You can't... Right. And so, I have a personal connection to these guys. Hammond, I was prepared because I had gotten Counts, Cuts, Moves, and Subtlety a year before I got the Hammond tape. And so I was learning. I didn't know where the heck I was going to go with any of these because there's no tricks in that book, in the Counts, Cuts, Moves, and Subtlety, Mentzer's book. There's no tricks in there. And I didn't have any books that used the Elmsley count. The trick that I did was an Elmsley count and a Jordan count to hide the card, and I was happy with that. Right. So, and when I got the Hammond, it just fell right into my hands. I was ready to do it, and I did it, and I didn't do it immediately. I wasn't one of these kids that's like, oh, look at what I can do. I literally said, I've been waiting too long for this stuff. I'm not going to throw it out there until it's perfect, or as perfect as I can make it. And so I have a deep connection to these things. I wasn't in the magic world. I was alone. I didn't know Mark D'Souza lived 15 minutes up the, or 20 minutes away from my house. And so I have a deeper, I'm not going to say than anybody else, but in my own experience with these particular guys, John took me in, I called him up, and he just took me under his wing. And so I have a connection to these people. I'm a student of Rocker Bomber, and he was a student of Marlowe. And so I am merely continuing, or I wish to continue, what those guys did. And not to say that I'm going to do anything that Marlowe could do, because he's like on a different level than, 99% of the people out there. But at least I can help to share this material with people, and that's really what I'm trying to do. And anything I do, I consider it a homage to my teachers. I always first things first is I thank them. It's not about me.
Right. That's something I actually wanted to ask you about is your opinion on the idea of a magic teacher and magic mentor. It seems like today everybody has one teacher, and that is Google. And, I'm sort of in the middle ground where I learn from DVDs and people. So anyway, go ahead.
And that's fine, and that's fine. If it works for you, that's good. But again, I was outside of the magic community. I didn't have a direct teacher. I was on the phone with John. I didn't meet him face to face until I was 21. So from 16 to 21, it was just phone conversations. So it was me that had to sit and learn this stuff and take it out into the bars, or take it out into we got into bars early. So, so I'd get free drinks, and I was doing Jennings stuff at that time. I was doing some,
which is knuckle busting.
Which is really knuckle busting, and I was really into that until I decided to blend the subtlety in, and that cleaned everything up. But anyway, so for me, I like my private study, and I don't consider I have people that buy my material. I have people that ask me questions, and and once I see that there's interest and they're willing to put the work in and they're having trouble, all you have to do is say, I'm having trouble, and then I'm on it, and I will help you as best I can. And it usually works out because I enjoy figuring out how to teach, because I wanted to teach English, so I have a teacher's sort of mentality or approach. And so that's fine, but ultimately it's going to be you that does the work. So having a teacher sit there and hold my hands, that's not what I did, and that's not necessarily what I would want to do. So, but other people have direct teachers, and they do fine on their own. So, I don't have any hard, fast answers on that, but I can only say what worked for me.
Right. So let's talk about that, sort of the putting in the work. Yeah. I mean, you do knuckle busting card magic, which basically means that you put many hours into your magic. So one of the common questions that we get from our audience is that they struggle with setting the time aside or practicing or things like that. And I imagine that that's something that you thrive at. So what would be your advice to somebody who's struggling to, get themselves to really practice, or get themselves to, or maybe how you structure practice sessions, if they do have structures or if they don't?
Yeah, I never had a structure. I thought about magic 24 hours a day. So I was always practicing in one way or another. I was practicing on a forklift. I was thinking about magic all the time. So I guess it's like that piano player in the World War I who didn't have a piano, but he practiced while he was in the foxhole. When he got home, he, could play Chopin or something, But that probably is not that easy.
But thing. At least it was for me. So I totally relate to that. Just you can't turn it off.
Yeah, you got it's one thing Vernon said. You got to love practice. And if you don't love practice,
Right.
somebody asked me, we used to get together every Monday at Bennigan's and Applebee's, every Monday night, the Nights of Slights. And we'd have all kinds of people come through, and laymen that are interested in magic or just enthusiastic friends of magicians. So this guy said, how long does it take you to learn a move or a trick? I said, well, let's put it this way. And this speaks to the dedication that you need. And I said, I opened up a book on riffle shuffles systems, Marlowe's book. And I said, I'm giving myself 10 years. In other words, you have to be dedicated. It's not going to come easy to you, you know?
Right.
So you got to have now obviously you don't need 10 years to do every trick, but you got to be willing to put that time in. And the time, which is what you you were asking about, is whenever you can.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I love about magic is that it's a portable art you can practice.
Yeah. I mean, on the second deal years ago, Paul Cummins gave us ways to practice the pass while you were driving with your rear view mirror. Now, I don't know if that was... I think that was a joke.
I would call that a bad call. I would call it a poor
decision. Distracted driving laws, maybe we've learned not to.
Yeah, everybody is so PC now. Come on. Of course, that was a joke, but it speaks to the idea that you find a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Marlowe, look at how much Marlowe published and wrote and practiced. He practiced constantly. He took a hat to the movies and did seconders and bottoms into the hat.
Right.
But this guy had a full-time job. He had a wife and kids. And yet he still had time to reshape 20th century card magic. So anybody that says, I don't have time to practice the double lift, come on.
That's actually a really interesting point where you look back at some of the magicians who we look up to and we're like, they had full-time jobs and they revolutionized it and they, come on, buddy, you can learn a trick.
They wrote letters. Nobody writes letters. I'm looking at letters, they're like 20 pages.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry, I couldn't get back to you. I had other letters to write.
My goodness.
It's interesting, it's interesting perspective to put on it. I mean, obviously things are a little bit different now, but we look at like I'll give you a contrasting or a similar example. It takes a company like a year or 2 years to make a Netflix series that we watch in 1 minute, right? And or in 1 day, right? We binge the whole series in 1 day. And the same thing, like it takes these magicians a lifetime to write a book, and then one snap, we read through it in 2 days, we play with a couple of tricks, it goes on the shelf and there it goes. And I mean, like, what benefit does that do anybody?
Yeah, and then they get the book and they want more. When's the next one coming out?
Yeah. Right.
I'm like, well, what trick do you do in the first one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How much did you like the first one? Because I don't see you doing any of it. Yeah, exactly. Let's say there's a young magician who's listening to this and is a little bit taken aback.
Get out now.
Before you fall in love, get out. Yeah. I remember, and I always feel bad when people ask about where to learn magic. You almost have to like, you tell them where, but you almost have to let them down easy and be like, by the way, it's really hard. Or like, by the way, to do it really well is really hard. I mean, obviously that's not what I would say to somebody who's asking about magic, but it's something that I keep in the back of my mind. When somebody says, oh, like, I want to learn, let's say someone asks to learn, like, I don't know, something simpler, checkers. Like, I would love to teach anybody checkers in 20 minutes and then go off in your world and play checkers. When people ask about magic, I'm almost, like, sorry to tell them that they have to start reading books and things like that. I
can teach you the cut deeper force, and that's about as much as you'll be able to handle.
So what would you recommend for like a beginner or a young guy jumping into this who's maybe a little nervous about what you're saying right now about this deep learning? Would you say too bad, Nana Boo Boo?
Well, first of all, no, it's not too bad. You just got to understand that it's going to take time, and you need to be happy with yourself. In other words, you got to be able to sit quietly and not be so compelled to go and show everybody what you know now.
Right.
You want to bring it in. bring it down a notch.
Right.
Because you're going to have to spend time with it.
Right.
So go to the you got to be, I know that the videos and the online, and that's all great. I've done it. I've got downloads, and I've done the online tutorial stuff, and
Yep.
but now I'm on books again. I am going to publish hardcover books, or hard copy books, I should say. That's my goal. So, but anyway, so getting back to that is that you should, like I said, bring it in, be happy learning it. That's important. Like Vernon said, you got to love practice, you got to love learning. So when I say go to the library, there's a great magic section, the kids, their eyes glaze over, their smile goes away, the magic is gone.
Right.
The magic comes when you perform for other people. So if you want to learn magic, you have to love to practice, and you have to know that it's about them and not you, and your audience and not you. So the secret stuff, the private stuff, stays private, stays secret, and then you use your personality to bring the magic part out to them. So that's it. You got to be content with both. You want to be able to perform, but also be content with or be willing to bring it in and be content with your private studies as well.
Yeah.
Now, if that's too heavy for the young, I don't know what age you're talking about, but there's a lot.
I mean, they're listening to a podcast, so I've assumed their attention span is a little longer. Let's say they're over 12.
I blacked out halfway through this so far, so I don't know what they're doing.
Are we still recording?
But anyway, I mean, these are things that are coming to mind. I don't have like here's how you learn magic. Step 1, get a deck of cards. Step 2, get a dove. I don't know. I just did it. I loved it. I was impassioned. I'm like, I don't know what the hell this shit is, but I'm gonna find out. And it took me years.
To learn how to do every
understand.
last aspect of it. Like there's
to even get information.
Yeah, there were when
I was reading Count's Cuts, I was literally going through every Count Cuts moves and subtlety in that damn book.
Right? Yeah, there was a much bigger barrier to information back in the day than there is now.
But I was content.
Right.
I was content with that information. I mean, I was hopeful that one day I would know how to use these things, but I was happy in knowing what I knew at that time. And so you need to have that attitude, I think. And then you need to remember when you're performing, it's about your audience and their appreciation of what you're sharing them. And if it's all about you, then you're just not going to get... I've seen so many guys, young guys, want to go right to the top. They want to go right... I know I can name some names. They go, and then they've matured over the years, thankfully, because it's a shame that happens. And they go right to the top, and then they fall, and they crash, and they get burned out real quick because they didn't have the right attitude going in. They thought it was about them.
They wanted the payoff to happen.
It's about the teachers. It's about the mentors. It's about the guys that put this shit down to begin with, and then ultimately it's about your audience when you perform. You are merely a vessel of the performance in this stuff.
That's
hallelujah.
Fantastic. You are the vessel.
You are the
hallelujah. So, as somebody who has created and worked on a lot of products that are derivatives of other people's things or value adds to other people's original creations, there's something that I wanted to ask you, which is, how do you know that you've done enough, that you've added enough for it to warrant this thing being re-released? And I'll give you an example. In your DVD Z, which is your work on the Zero Shuffle, it's fantastic. And I know, compared to when I learned the Zero Shuffle, which was in a Vernon book, Compared to that,
Inner secrets.
yeah, exactly. There 100% was value added. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this wrong all my life, or oh my gosh, this is such an interesting thing for me to play with this, and so on.
Yeah.
So a lot of magicians, you know, everybody and their brother has their own version of something. Even if you like ask a magician if they invent their own magic, often the answer is it's all my version of something. And whether that boils down to one different line, or it boils down to an entirely different handling, almost a different premise, and things by that nature. So I'm just wondering, how do you know when you've added enough value to a piece of magic, an original work, for it to warrant you thinking about a release or a re-release?
Well, in the case of the Zero Shuffle, we have to go back to '94. Which is when I saw Primetime Marlowe. There was a video that John had put out from Super 8 footage from 1971. Marlowe was in his own kitchen, and John filmed it on Super 8 film. And eventually it became a video. Well, that was the first look that I ever saw Marlowe working, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, that's the way I want it. Because I was doing the Zero because I did 2 shuffles Harry, which is a Hammond trick. And the Hammond didn't do it justice. I mean, it was functional and it got the job done, but it was very blocky. There was not a lot of cover. It was a 1-card cover kind of deal. But when I saw Marlowe do it, I'm like, whoa, that's it. So I literally spent the next 6 months frame by frame and studied each finger.
Wow.
For real. I'm not joking. And because I wanted to get this thing down. This is what I'm saying. You need to put the work in. And to really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so I figured out why. Well, I didn't know what I was doing because after a while the muscle memory kicks in, and it just sort of blends together. These discrete parts, these discrete steps blend in. It's like Crossway said in his book, Roger's Thesaurus, speed, go slowly through, speed will come. And the blending will come. It's like the master grip. That inner left or that inner right corner slips the hell out every damn time until it just syncs up with your hand. So, but then I was asked to teach it. It was Andy Gladwin. Somebody, Andy happened to be, he was in the second deal convention. All the English guys came over, which was great. Jack Parker was there. I got to meet Jack. And he was a big Hammond fan, so we had a nice conversation. But anyway, so he said, could you teach me the Zero? Because at that time I was really doing it pretty about 90% where it is now. And, it looked good, so people wanted to learn. So Andy said, teach it to me, and I tried. He says, I don't know what the hell you're doing. I said, neither do I, quite frankly. And then Trini Montez, out of Dallas now, said, well, why don't you come down to Baton Rouge and New Orleans and do a Zero workshop? I'm like, Trini, I cannot teach this thing. There's too much going on. He says, and of course, in his normal way, he just says, well, just do it. Okay. And of course, I say, okay, here's a challenge. I don't mind challenge, but we'll see how it goes. So I figured out the 3 main things that just had to be there. What were the 3 things from watching Marlowe and seeing that perfection? One of the best handlings I've ever seen.
Right.
And you can watch it. It's on film. It's not talk. It's actually reality. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I get off on it. I go off on tangents like that. I like to say Marlowe was the shit. That's just my, this is the way it is. It's just the way it is.
He's
but anyway, so I said 3 things. So I took it to Baton Rouge, did the workshop, and I actually saw people doing it better than I'd ever seen anybody do it. I mean, anybody outside of,
Wow.
And these guys didn't even know how to shuffle to begin with. I'm like, wait a minute. I may be onto something here. So it wasn't a matter of here's a new technique, though I have refinements. It's basically the way Marlowe did it. It's my analysis of Marlowe's shuffle or style, which is different than the way Zero did it, different than the way Gary does it, or Gary Plants, different the way the Wesley James, who does it extremely well. I saw him lecture and I asked him to do it. he grunted and did it and looked great, So now it became not a matter of what it looks good and it's great, but who cares? I can do it really well. You can't. It's not, but this isn't about me. Right. So if you want to do it, now it became a matter of how do I teach it? So really the Zero DVD, the Z DVD, I say Z period, cockily, with a cocky end, Z period, baby. This it's basically my workshop that I honed over about 10 years, where it's more about how to shuffle cards, because the false shuffle part is only one little element of it. You're really doing a true shuffle up to the square up. Everything up to that point is a square up, or is true, or legit, until you get to the square. So
I think one thing to highlight here, just because I don't want the non-card magicians at home to be confused, but I think one of the real important aspects here is if you want to add value to something, or you want to better understand it or have an impact on it, of course you have to study it, but more than that, the next layer is to teach it, right? Like that's the way that you truly understand something, is by teaching it to other people. That was one of the reasons I was so excited about starting a podcast, about the idea of sharing and teaching would do a better job of really help me understand everything from the basics of theory all the way to the more complicated things. So I think that's a real highlight of that, of adding value to something, which is that you're able to both study it in a meticulous manner, but then, be able to relay it to somebody else and hopefully add some value in between.
Right. And the real value comes when I get questions, because I get emails all the time. And I get more emails now. This is the amazing part, that they say, Steve, you taught me how to think about my technique. And now I'm not hesitant anymore. I'm moving forward. And so that's the goal, is to help these guys that are passionate, but have been overloaded with all this information. And they don't know what the hell to do half the time.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of learning to focus in on what your goal is and figure it out.
Being goal-oriented. And that actually comes up a lot.
Now, in my life, I'm not goal-oriented. but
at least in your magic, you are.
Card trick, shit, I'm on point.
Listen, we're not interviewing you about your life. We're interviewing about your magic, okay? I'm playing with you.
I know. Because magic is my life. So
you seem like you are, from the discussion of this, a real old school guy in magic. You study from the old works. You're not jumping at every new instant download, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I can't keep up with it.
More
I'm getting old.
Meticulous, exactly. More. I can't read that fat. No, I'm kidding. More of the meticulous aspect. And one of the things that we're trying to do on this podcast is bridge the old school and new school of magic and understand some of the discrepancies. So the question here is, and hopefully none of these two parts of this two-part question will irk you, but what do you love and what do you hate? What do you love and what do you hate about magic in the 2017-2018 space? Well, I mean, it's 2017. It's not 2018. But.
I've been reading the 50s, so I thought it was like 59 at this point. I don't have any comment on it. As I get out more, because I don't really go to a lot of conventions. I went to Magic Live 4 years in a row because I wrote for the magazine.
Right.
And I get to see a lot of people that I normally don't get to meet, because I go to the smaller, generally go to the smaller. Like I'll be at the Rocky Mountain. Yeah. There's a plug. I'll be at the Rocky Mountain session next month. Is that there's a lot of young guys that have the right attitude. And that's really what it comes down to, is having the right attitude. And so I'm finding that there's a lot of guys that do have the right attitude, and I'm happy about that. There's a lot of really cool guys out there that are young, that are not obnoxious.
Right.
And the other guys, they're great in their little circles of friends, and they get applauded all the time. But step too far out of there, you're going to have a rude awakening.
Right.
I'm not going to beat you up, but I'm just saying it's not going to be as happy.
Yeah, listen, magic for magicians and magic for lay people, or magic for friends versus
Yeah,
magic
yeah, yeah.
for
No,
real
and,
audiences.
and I understand that, and
very
that's
different
why I
things.
don't want to make any comments on that necessarily. But you know, when it comes to the kind of you know, the kind of people that I hang out with, the kind of approaches that I'm familiar with, you know, that I love, the attitude has to be serious. And if it's all about you, this is the problem that I have, I guess, with the modern.
Right.
Sometimes it seems to me, and maybe I haven't got out to all the places yet to meet all these guys, but the impression, anyway, is that they don't have the right attitude when it comes to doing good magic out in the real world for people.
Right.
If you're doing it for magic on YouTube, I mean, I'm not one to say that on YouTube. That's the, you know, on Skype now, I think it is. But no, I'm just kidding around. But yeah, I just think that they think it's about them and their skill is amazing. But it doesn't impress me. I mean, that's just, you can cut all this out.
Right. And
I just, you know, I'm to the point in my life.
You know what? It's a good answer because.
Yeah, you damn kids with your spinning cards and your flippity dippity, you know. It's like, you know what? It doesn't matter. You know, they're either going to get something out of this or they're not. And they're either going to.
And that's exactly the answer I think people need to hear is that, like you said, it's about the love that you have for what you do, whatever the hell
in the 90s,
yeah, and listen,
when I was growing up in magic, when I finally got to meet in late 90s into the mid 2000s, that was my, you know, when Cranzo, Fisher, Lee, Paul Wilson, you know, those were sort of my contemporaries that I knew. And then that's when Dan and Dave, I met Dan and Dave and Ricky Smith, who are all doing very well. I'm very happy and very proud of them, and they're doing great. I mean, nobody knew them on the West Coast or on the East Coast or down in New Orleans where the convention was. And they're flipping cards, and we were very impressed. But the attitude was sort of this transition between the pre-internet into the internet, because I straddled
old school and new school,
those two eras.
Yeah.
So I grew up.
Yeah, and we're literally,
and that's good.
We're trying to bridge that gap with Discourse and Magic, you know, with this long form conversation and trying to help, trying to enlighten the old guys and enlighten
the all the old guys that are still rocking and rolling.
Well, we're doing
all the time. I hear them say, "Man, did you see this video of this kid? Look at that! He's flipping the card around his head, and there's no strings attached. It's amazing."
Yeah, exactly. So we are now getting to the point of the wrap-up of the episode, but we've got like a whack of wrap-up questions, so it's not ending anytime soon. The first is, one of the things that we do is we each mention something from the episode that we think is like a very important distilled point for people at home. You know, it's about 45 minutes worth of talking. So for me, I think one of the most important aspects is and this was one of the things that I even wanted to focus on, and one of the reasons why I'm most inspired by what you do is to really pick something and focus on it. You know, when I think back to my magic and when I look at my magic, there's very few real influences. And I feel that if now knowing that I were to double down on those influences and really work through their material and really, like, you know, dive in instead of, you know, the whole 2017, 2018 shiny object syndrome of magic, that's really something that I want to focus on, the sort of long-form, slow dedication on produced material from the people who really resonate with me. So I think that's something that people can take home, and that there's years and years of material in pages and pages of books.
One of the things that I really... It's very similar... I am thankful for the mentors that I do have. I do have some real in my life connections that have shaped how I do magic. But the thing that resonated with me most was the idea that you have to love every aspect of it, which is the psychological part and specifically the practice part. I remember when I first got into it, I had no intentions of ever doing the muscle pass for everybody, but I spent half a year learning it because I just enjoyed actually learning how to do it. So that's something I think that is very important for magicians to hear, because if you're struggling to stay motivated in learning because you want to, perform right away and you're not getting the reactions you want, maybe you should focus on loving.
I agree with everything I said.
Steve, what about you?
Do you have a favorite part of the episode? do you have a part that you think is maybe like the most important for someone at home if they were to take one thing away?
Yeah, just remember that when you perform, it's about performing. Magic is meant to be performed, whether it be for your friends, and it's about their enjoyment and their the mystery and the fun and the surprise and creating relationships. And that's what this is supposed to show, or to my mind, is what this should be about.
Right.
I don't know if I said that, but
I think you did. I think you did very well. One of the things that we are doing at the ends of our episodes is creating an endless loop of podcast guests, which means that if every podcast guest recommends another podcast guest, then we will never run out and the podcast will go on for eternity. So is there somebody who you think we should have on the podcast? And if you say names that we have already had on, I will chop your head off. No, I'm kidding.
That's okay.
Who should we have on?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, thank you. I wrote it myself.
That's a good question.
You can just give a few options of some magicians that you like right now that are alive, and I'll tell you if we've interviewed them all.
Well, I don't know. I could probably think of somebody. I'm trying to think if they would be good for a podcast. I don't. I can just rattle off, different
name
names.
Two names. I'm sure one of them that you think would be great to share knowledge about magic.
Well, I think Rocker Bomber would be great.
Awesome. Great place to start. One of the other segments that we do is, very excitedly, you have, at least by the most recent count, 1 million magicians listening in on average to every episode. So
really,
yeah, it's getting big. So is there something that
I didn't know there was that many magicians?
Oh man, and they're all actually just listening to this Canadian-based podcast.
Nice.
What? Yeah,
nice.
they're all tuned in. What is it that you want to tell them more than advice, but almost down to a PSA? So maybe something that you wish every magician in the world would know right now.
Well, I think my last comment is the comment.
Yeah,
it's
good.
This is about performing for people. Them. And it's about your audience. And moves are not tricks. They are tools. Mm-hmm. And listen to your audience and respond to them.
Yeah.
Tools, not tricks.
It's all about the audience. Tools, not tricks.
That's
exactly it. And of course, do you have anything to plug? Go ahead, plug it all.
Yes, I absolutely do. There's exciting things happening. I just got back from Chicago. Those guys up there in Chicago, down there for you guys, are just rocking it. I mean, I was concerned about Magic Inc. for a number of years because it just seemed those magic shops were starting to slowly go away. I know one of my favorite shops, Denny Haney, Danny and Lee's Magic Studio, had some rockiness, but they're working too. But Chicago Magic Inc. is they're building that stuff back up. They just put out Ryan Plunkett and Michael Feldman's new hardcover book. Yeah. So they're publishing books. Those guys are great up there in the Magic Lounge. So here's the plug. Okay, what I'm doing here on my end in New Orleans is I was given I don't want to say the torch, but I am now beginning to compile Marlowe material that's unpublished.
Oh, wow.
I'm also, oh yeah, no, you have no
I have no
idea.
idea.
And I have an archive in my place here of Marlowe's notes, original photographs for books like, well, right now on my website, I'm offering a set of those photos from Marlowe Without Tears that were used for the drawings. So these are the
Wow.
original
Holy.
photographs. And so what this is going to do, this is not for collectors. I mean, I want to go to auction at some point for some of these things. But really, and again, this goes back to the same thing we were talking about, that this is about the audience. And my audience, aside from my own material, but when it comes to the Marlowe stuff, are Marlowe freaks. Right. Okay? I love these people. We love Marlowe. So I want to try to get those pieces of the puzzle into their hands. I don't want it in the collector's hands to collect this. I want somebody to really appreciate this. And the money is going to go directly to my first book, which is called Marlowe Speaks, a session at Tony's Restaurant. And this is the same restaurant that Bill Malone and Marlowe got together at on Wednesday nights or Wednesday afternoons every week for many years. And this is Marlowe on audio tape.
Wow.
Detailing 6 methods for the students' exchange, the old, the Jerry Sadowitz pocket interchange. Yeah. But these range from very easy to complex and gimmicked. And I want to capture those moments in the restaurants, because that's where you hung out with these guys. And I'm going to dedicate it to the unsung waitresses who have to deal with our shit. IHOP at 3 a.m.
That is absolutely awesome that you've given a resource not only for Amazing Magic, but for all of the, what do we call them? The Marlowe files, the Marlowe lovers of this world.
And also, I'm beginning, and I'm going to start filming when I can figure out these damn microphones. To do the fundamentals of the Revolutionary Card Technique series.
Oh, awesome!
So these are the fundamentals. So these are for the guys who are like, man, I got this big book I bought from Magic Inc. on my shelf.
Yeah, it's a daunting book.
It's like reading a manual for an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And so I know from my experience with the Zero Shuffle. Mm-hmm. That if they're given those fundamental tools and they understand how these things work and why they work, they have the tools now, the knowledge, and the physical ability to press on into that book and get the killer material that's in there. So I want to do the fundamentals, and so the proceeds of the sales of these archive items, the choice Marlowe photos, I call them, are going to go directly to these projects. I have a wonderful illustrator, which I won't reveal right now, but she's never been used in any book. But her illustrations will bring Marlowe right off the page. Those things will look like, boom, they are performable, and they're beautiful. She does a great job. So I want to produce very nice. There's no looking at old Marlowe books, they look like actual manuals. So, Bill Malone told me, he says, Vernon's got all these wonderful, nice books, and the students are like, they're hardcover and bound, and Marlowe's like spiral bound and PDFs, and it's like, you know what?
Trying to upgrade, upgrade Marlowe.
And it's not about, I'll tell you this quick story and the attitude that Marlowe had about this. So some guy So the Unexpected Card book came out in 1974. It was cobbled together. The formatting was horrid, and it was spiral bound. It was put out. Okay. So this guy gets that book, and the following year, 76, 2 years later, the Marlowe magazine #1 comes out, and he writes Marlowe a letter. And it says, I hope that this new book is not as, basically as shitty as the first book. in regards to what it looks like.
Right.
And since Marlowe was really
Right.
all about the content, who cares what the book looks like? Did you read it? Did you get something out of it? Did you do anything
Did
out
you
of it?
read it? Yeah.
He wrote in the upper corner of his letter, which he would write notes on his letters, so that when he wrote back, he would have his notes. History. This is blah blah blah, and he would say answered on this date. Just to keep a record. And underneath that, it says gave him his money back. So that's where that's at. But anyway, but aside from that, I think it's time to present Marlowe as the cool cat that he was. Because this guy, you want to talk about cigars and drinking.
Marlowe's the guy.
Tally hose. With a nice gold watch and a nice big ring and dressed to the nines. I mean, he was a product of the 40s.
There's different eras of magic, and there's different ways that magic is cool in its different years. And it seems like there's no doubt that Marlowe was cool.
Oh yeah.
So it's
time
awesome.
to bring that to the forefront.
Exactly, and it's awesome that you are heading hashtag. What did I call the hashtag before? Hashtag bring back Marlowe or whatever. Hashtag
into the fray and into the fire is what it is. Because it's an uphill battle with some of these guys.
Yeah. And just to mention from your plug earlier that I have learned from Steve from a couple of very intimate lectures and some bigger lectures and long car rides in the back of a car. And I will tell you, he is one of the best card teachers that I have ever worked alongside. Anybody can hold a deck of cards and talk about their ideas, but he is really one of the best card teachers that I ever have learned from. And even more specifically on that Zero DVD, it is so specific that it's incrable.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's not just about the zeros.
Yeah, I mean, you re-taught me how to shuffle cards, and even still, when I sit down at a table that has a close-up pad on it, the first way I put my hands on the deck is wrong, and I fix it, and then I go, right? So,
well, I just got an email just yesterday. The guy says, when it wasn't doing, it wasn't working right, I say, look, I got to get back to that starting grip and maintain that thing throughout. And I mean, I appreciate it, and I'm glad that this was the goal,
podcast?
And I think I reached it.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, the podcast. So I think I did reach it, and I'm very happy.
I think that
happened, and I'm going to continue to keep that trend going. The right details, not overrun with details like it sounds. You're running around in circles, but the correct details that'll get you going. So, if anybody is interested, you can get it as a download or as a hard copy. I will sign the DVD.
And he'll even sign the download if
beautifully.
Yeah,
sure. I'll come to your house, sign your computer, whatever. So
sign your face, whatever you like. And with that, we'll give you a big, huge thank you. And you do have my endorsement on that DVD. It's funny, we have a lot of people on, and I don't buy a lot of magic anymore. Kind of the Discourse in Magic way is stop buying new tricks and start focusing on the stuff that you have. Yeah. But I will say that yours is something that I have bought and have really, really benefited from. Thank you for that.
And it's SteveReynoldsMagic.com. That's where you go.
SteveReynoldsMagic.com. And I will say on that note, I don't know how big you are on social media, but definitely follow Steve on Facebook if he'll accept you, because he's posted some cool stuff. I've learned some magic just scrolling through my feed and seeing some weird stuff that he's been offering. So really, really cool stuff from there. And of course, a big, huge thank you to you, Steve, for joining us on this episode.
And a big thank you to everyone at home for making it all the way through.
Yes.
We will see you all next week on Discourse in Magic.
See you guys later. Well, there you have it, episode 74 of Discourse in Magic with Steve Reynolds. I hope you liked it. As usual, if you liked it, rate it, subscribe, do all the fun stuff, and go check us out on Instagram. We're doing some cool things, some cool videos and photos and quotes from episodes, so it would really mean the world if you gave that a follow at Discourse in Magic. Otherwise, see you Thursday.